I'm a blacksmith by trade. I grew up in the Czech Republic in Eastern Europe. I did blacksmith, then I studied sculpture and a little bit of product design, looking at traditional techniques and technologies, which would be ceramics, paper making, wood making. And my wife was American. When we met and we lived there for a few years, then she wanted to come back, finish education, and start a family. I came with her, and I just couldn't find work because I was a blacksmith with a master's degree in fine arts, and it's just like no work. So design is something that really falls at the intersection of all those things that I've been interested in, which is reproduction, the making of things, kind of the making culture in general, but also the more conceptual approach to our interactions with objects, our thinking about objects, our tactile experiences. So I started working as a designer, or started design practice kind of out of necessity, but also because it married my interest in a way that was both, allowed me to survive, and it still kind of keep me interested. It wasn't just like a job. And I became interested in food when my wife was working a night job as a bread baker. She's a photographer, but while she was in school, she worked at a French bakery. So I grew up in New York, so bread there is a huge thing. It's a staple. That's what it is all about. So when you come to the States, you don't. 15 years ago, it was worse than it now. It just doesn't exist. So going to this little French bakery was really important to me. It was just kind of connecting me back to home. And she would also need help. Like at 4 in the morning, she would call me and be like, "Please come and help me mix the sourdough and make baguettes or whatnot." So I would come on, and I was really intrigued by, it's just another material, just like any other material I'm used to handling, but it's transcending this barrier that we always encounter. Like if you're a sculptor, you design an object, whereas as a designer, designing an object, a sculptor building some, expression of intent. It's always physical, or almost always, and you never go beyond this consumption of it that's visual, auditory, hearing, smell. And the food was just crossing this boundary in a way that I was just so intrigued by. And it also, there have been artists who tried to work with food. The problem is the food element always sucks. It's a completely different skill set, and it requires training and experience that is, a real investment. It's not something you can just jump into and do really quickly. And I felt like if I tried to use food creatively in the sense that it would be the case, it would not be good. So even though I might conceptually be able to think of some ideas or processes, I wouldn't be able to execute. So the first chef she was working for, and it wasn't his thing, so he wasn't really interested. And then a couple years later, I got an email from Grant Atkins, just saying, "I'm a chef, I'm looking for somebody to design new ways of serving food." And the openness of that question was just really interesting. It got me extremely excited because he wasn't looking for a fork or a knife or a plate. He was really looking for new ways of serving food. And I might be repeating parts that you already heard, I don't know. But it's, it was really exciting in that sense to just kind of be like, "Okay, let's forget what we know. Let's forget what we know about these things that we interact with. Like, what if we started to look at the food in a completely different way, and it's delivered in a completely different way?" And you fail 99% of the time. 99% of the time, your solution already exists, and it's readily available. But there are a few instances that it just felt new and fresh, and it really transformed the experience. So we kind of continued the conversation and continued the collaboration. I don't really have a set process for the way I work. In terms of I work with other clients and with other chefs, or develop hotel tableware things. They're not necessarily, I always try to keep them interesting, but they're not changing the world at all. So with every project, you kind of look at it and you to me, design process is semantic. Like you really ask a question and you're trying to answer that question. So if you can articulate a question simply, like really get down to the essence of it, like what are we trying to do, then you can articulate an answer that's going to be simple, meaning it's going to be a tool, an angle for the project or for the process. So that's kind of, in very general terms, the approach. But every project is so different that it's really different. You know, like with the Alinea and Mixed Aviary crew, like the collaboration is just super open. Like sometimes they have an idea that's culinary, sometimes they have an idea that's an object, sometimes I have an object or an idea that's interaction or that's experiential, and they just kind of come back and we run with it. And like in a way, it's very blurred. Like there's no specific process to the collaboration. But I mean, with every design project, ultimately you have to find the core question, and then you can start to articulate an answer. Otherwise you might not necessarily be. Otherwise, you're probably going to be styling, which is not something that I'm interested in. So, like I get excited about anything. Like the thing is about working on these two different levels, it allows you to just say, forget this, and you can go back and work on this part, and then you get tired. You can't, or get in a dead end, and then you can just swing back, and so you can alternate the conceptual and the practical elements of the design process. So I think that both are equally important. They both inform each other, but ultimately, it's So I don't think that I would say I prefer one over the other. I mean, they're completely different animals. At the end of the day, I think if I had to choose one, it would probably be the experiential stuff. It would be stuff that's more conceptual, stuff that's more connected to our behavior. It's a little bit more, like it's just a little bit more narrative than it's just a physical object. It's a different skill set. It's a different set of problems. And I think if I had to make a choice, I would pick that. But I don't think it would be wise to have to make that choice. I think that the fact that you kind of get to oscillate between these two extremes is important for both. Like they both, every project is a learning process. Every time you start a project, you learn a lot. And it almost doesn't matter whether it's the experiential thing or whether it's a plate for a hotel, because you're going to learn a lot in that process, and what you've learned is not going to go away. Like it's going to stay with you. Well, I think it's the experiential design, really. Like it's, trying to articulate experiences rather than objects. I think in a way we live in at this point in time where we're moving from a material society to an experiential society. Like people are stopping to value objects, and it's the experience that really is what has a value to all of us. Because objects can be replaced, and the manufacturing methods have improved so much. And, like it's just, we've removed the magic from the object. We've kind of stolen the beauty that exists like by being hidden or by not being understood. Whereas now people feel like with all these manufacturing technologies, objects can be reproduced ad infinitum. Like it's just forever and ever and ever you can be making all these things. And it inherently loses value. I think I understood this thing when I first came to the States, because coming from Eastern Europe, after the revolution, there's this like trying to catch up with the West thing, and it really is about material culture, material wealth. And I came to the States, and the same objects that people are really valuing where I'm from here, disposable, have no value, people don't care. And I realized that the object is a tool, and we should treat it as a tool. So at the end of the day, you're either designing the tool or you're designing the end result, which is the experience. So anyway, I feel like I'm rambling, but it doesn't make sense.